Boker Tov. So today's daf Yomi, we're going to start on the bottom of 48b, around 8 lines from the bottom. The Gemara is discussing the dispute between Rav and Rabbi Yochanan. That Rav says that when you pay a down payment, you've acquired really the part corresponding to the down payment. And Rabbi Yochanan says when you give the down payment, you acquire the whole item. Of course, we're studying today for a Schluss for Am Yisrael, Yeshua for Am Yisrael, a Shmira for the Chayalim, Matzah for the Shvuyim. So the Gemara says that maybe this dispute between Rav and Rabbi Yochanan is actually Machokas Tanayim. Maimok Tanayim in the bottom of 48b, because a Malva is Chavera Mashkon, somebody who lends his friend money and he takes a mashkon, he takes the collateral, he still lends him $100 and he takes back a watch. And then the Shemitah year starts. We know the Shemitah year cancels out loans, but it doesn't cancel out loans which are collateralized. So we see from here, it says the Brisa, Afal Pisha Eno Shava Ela Peleg, even though the collateral is only worth half of the loan, Eno Meshamit. The loan is still not canceled. The Shemitah year doesn't cancel it. That's the position of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, where Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says, so if the collateral corresponds to the whole loan, then eno meshamit, then it doesn't cancel it. But if the collateral does not correspond to the whole loan, then it is canceled. Meshamit, it cancels it. What does it mean when it says eno meshamit? So, what does it mean when it says in the Brisa that it doesn't cancel it? Eno meshamit to come Rabbi Shimon Gamliel when he says if the collateral is worth half the loan, then the Shemitah year doesn't cancel it. Ilema Kenegdo, if you want to say it doesn't, that the loan is not canceled corresponding to the collateral, means to say that even the part that's collateralized is canceled. Well, that doesn't make sense. Well, if that's the case, so according to Rabbi Yehuda, what's the whole purpose of the mashkon? It does nothing. We're on top of Mem Tes Amud Aleph. So it must mean when Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says Eno Meshamet, that according to half the loan, the collateral is not going to, that if you have a collateral, the spackle year does not cancel the loan. My Eno Meshamet come Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, Eno Meshamet Bekulo, means to say that it must mean, it means Eno Meshamet Bekulo. It means to say that it even though that the mashkon does not cancel half of it, even though the mashkon is only half of it, the sabbatical year does not cancel the entire loan, meaning to say that the sabbatical year does not cancel any aspect of this loan. The whole loan is going to be standing, and the sabbatical year doesn't cancel it because you have collateral on half of it, according to Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. And that's going to be like the position of Rabbi Yochanan, because the collateral says they acquired everything. And my mishamet, and when it says the Kama Rabbi Yehuda says that if you have a collateral, the Shemitah year still cancels the loan. What does that mean? What does it mean? It means it cancels that part that there's no mashkon on. And so that seems to be like Rav. So that's what the Gemara is going to say. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel savar keneged kulo hu konas. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel must be like Rabbi Yochanan, that when you put down a collateral, you buy the whole thing. So therefore, you've acquired the whole thing. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda Nasi savar keneged hu konas. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says, no, you've purchased the part that only corresponding to it, and that's why the sabbatical year still cancels the loans that don't correspond to the collateral. So the Gemara says, no, we don't have to say that. Well, my Eno Meshamet to come Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. No, when Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says that sabbatical year doesn't cancel the loan, it doesn't mean the whole loan. It means it doesn't cancel that part that there's a collateral on. And Mikal, Rabbi Yehuda Anasi Savar, so the Gemara says, well, now we're saying Rabbi Yehuda Anasi is saying that even though there's a collateral on part of the loan, that part of the loan is still going to be canceled by the sabbatical year. So if that's the case, what's the point of the collateral at all? The Gemara says, well, you're right. The collateral is not to secure the loan. It's just l'zikaron tvar b'alma. In this case, the collateral is just to remind both parties that there is a loan. So remember that there's a loan. Sometimes you give a collateral that reminds us of the details of the loan. So now we have a couple of stories. Rav Kahana Yavue Zuze Akitna. Rav Kahana, they gave him some money for some linen. With Sophie Yakir Kinna, but then the price of linen was raised before he drew the linen to him. before the person who he sold it to had done a mashicha on the linen and thereby formally acquired it. Also, Kami the Rav. So Rav Kahana came to Rav and he said, "B'mai dinah." So he wants to know if he can back out of it. So Rav says, "B'mai dinakita zuze avlu." He says, "Well, the part that you took money for, you have to give to them, because otherwise you're going to be under the concept of misha para, that you can't go back on your deal, the curse." V'idach dvarim ninu, and the rest of the thing that you haven't received money for, that's just like words. It's like Rav. Rav says that you give a down payment, you haven't acquired the whole thing, you've only acquired that part that you gave the money for. And and if there are words, you're not going to be in violation of this concept called acting without good faith. Acting without good faith. Didn't matter because we learned Devarim. Let's say there's just words. Let's say you just came to like an agreement with words. Rav says to go back on that is not going to be considered lacking in good faith. Whereas Rabbi Yochanan says that if you just have a verbal agreement and you back out on it, that is indeed considered to be a case of lack of acting without good faith. So the Gemara says, Meitzi Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda is going to challenge his position of Rav. Rav says that if you just have a verbal agreement, it's not considered a lack of good faith to go back on it. But what about the fact that there's a brisa, and the brisa says Ma tamu amar hin tzedek. The pasuk says that you need to have fair weights and measures so you don't defraud the other person. And it says this about it says about a hin and an ephah. An ephah is a much larger volume, 72 lugan. A hin is very small, only 12 lugan. So if the Torah is makbid about such a large volume that you can't be off by a little bit, then for sure by a small volume you can't be off. So why does the pasuk have to say hin tzedek? The hin is included within the ephah. So why does it have to say both? So to tell you, it means you have to be a person of your words. You can't go back on your words. So why does Rav say that if you go back on your verbal agreement, it's not considered mechusari amuna? It's not considered to be acting in bad faith. So Amar Abai, Abai says this idea of hin shachat tzedek and lav shachat tzedek, it's to teach us it's to teach us you shouldn't speak out of both sides of your mouth. You shouldn't say one thing in the mouth and the other thing in the other in the heart. That whatever you're saying, you should believe and do it. So Meisver Rabbi Shimon Omer. So again, Rabbi Shimon is going to again challenge Rav. This time we're challenging Rav from a brayso. Rabbi Shimon says, "Apal pisha amru talas kone dinar zav." So we had this on yesterday's daf. So we said even though we said that when you pull on the cloak, you've acquired the golden coin. Vein dinar zav kone talas. When you pull on the gold coin, you don't acquire the talas. B'kol makom, nevertheless, kach halacha. That's the law. Vo amru. Misha par me'anshe dura mabel me'anshe dura fogo who also par misha aino omed b'diburo. But he says God will pay the one who doesn't stand by his word. So we see from here clearly that if you don't stand by your word, you're going to be punished by God. So why does Rav say it's not considered mechusari amuna? Rav seems to be directly against this brayso of Rabbi Shimon. Gemara says it's a Tanahi. It's a machokas Tanaim. The Tanaim, because we learned in the Mishnah, we're going to get to this later on. Tapei Gimel. Ma'aseh Rabbi Yochanan Matya Sh'amar Rabbeinu. Say this Charlanu poem. That one time, so we're going to have basically a Mishnah that supports the position of Rav, that if you just have a verbal agreement, you're allowed to back out on it. Because even though we said that if you have a verbal agreement, it seems to be that you're in violation. But Rav has a source here, because the source comes from Rabbi Yochanan Masya, who said to his son, "Save the Sacharwan Poem, go hire me workers." So the worker says, "Okay, I'm going to give you this much per diem that you're going to eat for a meal." He says, "I'm going to provide you lunch." When he comes home, his father said to him, you promised them a meal, even if you make a meal like Shlomo you still, it's an open-ended check. You gave them a blank check. Shem b'nei Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. These guys are used to royalty. They're children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Before they start to work, say them or go back and say to them, I'm not giving you a wedding feast. I'm just giving you bread and beans for lunch. And if you're going to say not like Rav, that once you agree to a verbal agreement, you can't go back on it because of lack of good faith. How could he tell his son? How could Rabbi Yochanan Matya tell his son, go back and change what you promised them? So the Gemara says, no, Shani us in that case is different because Paul and Gufayo is something at that time. In that case, the workers themselves had never really entered into this agreement. The workers themselves never entered in. They didn't formalize it. My time, huh? Made the yadi da'avu samach. They knew this boy that was a young kid. He didn't have the authority to act, so they weren't relying on it. Well, if that's the case, if that's the case, even once they start to work, why do they have to rush back and get them before they start to work? Even once they start to work, he could say that's not what we promised. No, once they start their job, they for sure at that point would agree that this man is giving them a big meal. Amar Meimar, Amar Kamei Davua, they would say to themselves, he said it in front of his father, and the father agreed to it. So it says the Gemara, does Rabbi Yochanan really say this position? Does Rabbi Yochanan really say this idea that, unlike Rav, that you're not allowed to go back on your word? Once you say to a word, you can't go back on it. Does Rabbi Yochanan really say this? Rabbi Yochanan said that if a person says, I'm giving you a gift, he's allowed to go back on it. Obviously, even though he's given him these words, he's allowed to go back on it, meaning to say, it's not a violation of not keeping his promise. So Amar Papa, yeah, Rabbi Yochanan, even though Rabbi Yochanan, generally speaking, says you can't. Rabbi Yochanan says you're allowed to go back, but Rabbi Yochanan himself admits that if it's a small gift to Samcha Datayel, that by a small gift he says you can't go back because once they come to a small gift, we're going to say that they really imagined it that it's done deal. By a small gift, it's not allowed to go back because the person relies on it. And when he says you're allowed to go back, that's by a large gift. Because there the person doesn't really think he's getting it. So that's where Rabbi Yochanan says you go back only on a large gift, but not a small gift. Amar Papa, so and Hachinami is indeed it's logical. Amar Rabbi Avo, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Yisrael Shamar Ben Levi. So now we have from the following case comes from a statement of Rabbi Yochanan about the following case. Now let's say there was a Jew who said to a Levite, you basically, I have a bundle of meiser, an amount of like a bushel of crops that I'm tithing to meiser in my that I tithed, and I'm giving it to you. Basically, I separated my tithe and I'm giving it to you. And then under those circumstances, and that's considered a small gift. So Rabbi Yochanan is saying that Ben Levi Rishayla Soto Chumas Meiser Amakom Achar. Ben Levi could use it and assume that it's for sure a done deal, and it could take out a separate tithe on it to give to the Kohen, and then eat his produce. Now, if you want to say that once you give a small gift, you can't go back, according to Rabbi Yochanan, Misham Hachi Rishai. That's why the Levi can rely upon the fact that it says, as Rashi says, the Jew's not going to do a sin. He's not going to promise one thing and not give it to another Levi. And so therefore, it's a small gift. Because what is the Jew getting from this benefit that he's giving him? Just the benefit of who he's giving it to. Because he could be given to every Levite who he wanted. But if you're going to say that, in fact, even though he promised us he can go back on it, Amai Rashai, why is he going to be allowed to take away the Trumas Meiser from another place on it? Why can we say, okay, he designated this as Trumas Meiser? We have to be concerned that indeed, in fact, that's not the case. That maybe he never gave this meiser to the Jew and gave it to somebody else. And then if he said, well, I'm using that part, I'm designating that as Trumas Meiser, now I can eat the rest of my crops. But it'll be that the Levi will be eating from his meiser without separating Trumas Meiser, and it'll be in violation of the prohibition of Tevel. And so therefore we see from here that Rabbi Yochanan says that once you do a small gift, you can't go back on it. A verbal promise, you can't go back by Matan Moetes. Where it says, no, that's not necessarily the case, because what might we be talking about here? Could go into Natsal Mimenu V'chazer V'fkidu Atzal. No, here we could talk about a case where the Levite actually took the tithe from the Jew, and then he went back and he deposited it to him. And so, therefore, since the Levite completely owned them, therefore he can make a Chumas Meiser because the Jew is not able to go back on it. So there's no concern. Well, if that's the case, we want to say that the Levi actually took the fruits in his own possession. Ema Sefer, the next clause states, the son of Ben Levi Achar, that if the Yisrael gave it to a different Levi, that the first Levi has no legal claims against him. He's just allowed to say, oh, you didn't keep your word. If you want to say that the first Levi actually took possession and then he deposited a tarumos, given the mamones legabe. Once he pulled into his possession, it's his. The guy is a thief. He gave away his tithe. So we must be talking about a case, but the low not low. We must be talking about a case the Levite didn't actually take it into his possession. And so Shmamina, we see from here that once you make a small gift, Rabbi Yochanan says you can't go back on it. That's what Rabbi Yochanan says. If you make a verbal promise for a small gift, you can't go back on it. Now I have another story. A guy gave some money for sesame seeds. In the end, the price of sesame seeds went up. So then the guy who sold the sesame didn't want to go through with the deal. He says, here, I'm going to give you back your money and I want to keep the sesame. So but the guy who bought the sesame didn't want to take back his money because he says, no, I want my sesame. In the end, Ignav, but in the end, that money which was lying around, he puts it on the table. He says, you take it. He says, no, you take it. Well, a thief came along to took it. So now we want to know who's responsible. So also Kame the Rava. Rava said to them, he said to him, the guy who owned the sesame said, take back your money. And you didn't take it. I mean, not only is this guy not considered a paid watchman, he's not even an unpaid watchman. It's your loss. It's not the guy who has the sesame's loss. You should take him back your money. So okay, but the guy who owned the sesame is going to get should get the curse of going back on his word. Yeah, he's going to be cursed for going back on his word, but legally speaking, he gets to keep the sesame and he's not responsible for the money. Amar Rav Papa, Amar Ravina. So, but Rav Papa says, Ravina said to me, "Udidi Amar Yahumi Rabbanan." There, one of the Rabbanan told me this story. V'Rav Tavus Shemei. His name was Rav Tavus. Amar Rav Shmuel Bar Zutra Shemei. Some say his name was Rav Shmuel Bar Zutra. Diyavi Yavile Kol Chalo Da Amar Lo V'Kamashana V'Dibura. And Rav Shmuel Bar Zutra told me that if you give him all the treasures in the world, he would not change his mind. And he said, but uvda, that once I had an incident, ahu yoma, that this was the incident. So the thing with the sesame was a totally different story. It was not exactly what happened. That this happened with me. And that day, apaya demali shabbat. This is the story with the sesame. It was Friday afternoon. And I was sitting there. And a man came along, and he stood by the door. And Amrali, and he said to me, and he said to me, do you have any sesame to sell me? And Amrali, and I said to him, I'm on top of Mem Testament Bays, low. I said to him, I don't have any sesame to sell you. So Amrali, so he said, let me leave this money with you as a deposit, because it's almost Shabbos. I said to him, listen, I'm not taking responsibility. Here's my house. Do whatever you want. It was so he put it in the house, and it was stolen. Now also coming to Rava. Now he comes to Rava, and he wants me to pay for his money. Rava says, no, I'm going to call Beisa, He says, anytime you say, oh, here's my house, do what you want, not only you're not a paid watchman, you're not even an unpaid watchman. You don't have to pay him anything. Amrulay, so he said, how could that be the story? But he says explicitly that the Rabbanan said to Rava, he should have gotten the curse of Mishapara. I mean, it's say that it's a totally different version. Amar Li, and he said to me, that Chacham responded, that never happened. That part of the conversation never happened. No, totally different story. Reb Shimon says, Kol Shekasaf biyado yado al yonah. Reb Shimon says, whoever has the money in his possession, he's got the upper hand. Meaning to say he can go back once he gets the money, but the purchaser can't go back. That's what Reb Shimon said. But the Chacham say both can go back until the Mashiach, until the pulling of the object takes place. Tanya, Amar Rabbi Shimon, Emasai, when do we say that he could go back? Bisman shakesef haperos biyan mocher, when the money and the fruits are in the hands of the seller. That's when he can go back, says Rabbi Shimon. Kesef biyan mocher, but if the money's in the hands of the seller, peros biyan lokeach, and the fruits are in the hands of the purchaser, in a yachol achzer, well, then he can't go back anymore. Bimnei shekas will be biyado. So then he can't go back under those circumstances. Bimnei shekas will biyado, which the Gemara seems to say, because the money is in his hand, and the Gemara understands that. What does this mean? That the money is in the hands of the purchaser. So the Gemara says, "Biyado." What do you mean? It's in the hands of the purchaser. He paid the seller for it. Biyad mocherhu. He paid the seller. So the Gemara says, no. It means to make hospital biyado. No, he can't go back on that. It can't go back because the thing that he purchased is in the hands of the purchaser, so it can't go back. So pshita. Well, the Gemara says, well, that's obvious. That's a sale. One guy gave the money. The other guy gave him the fruit. So now they're done. Let's go. We're done. That's the whole deal. So the Gemara says, no. I'm a rabbi. Skinan could go and no, this is this. What's the ukimta here? Could go and no, we're talking about a case where the purchaser owned the purchaser was staying in the second floor, the attic of the seller. And so basically the seller put the fruit he bought in the attic, which the purchaser was renting. So time of Takina Rabbana Mashiach, what's the reason why, generally speaking, the rabbis made a decree that the sale is not final until you actually pawn it? Because we're concerned he's not going, that the seller, if he still has it in his possession, he's not going to exert himself to save it. But here, the crop's already in the domain of the purchaser. And if there was an accidental fire, therefore he's going to go and bring it. And so therefore, there the sages didn't institute this idea that he could go back, that he could go back on it, but right away when he gives him the money, the acquisition takes place. So you see from here that Rabbi Shimon is explaining the brisa that when the Chamim say that when you give the money, you have not acquired it, and until there's a Mashiach that the seller could go back, that's only in a circumstance where the money and the object is in the domain of the seller. But if the fruits are found in the upper chamber of where the purchaser is renting, so since he has the ability to get to there, the money is acquired because the seller cannot get to it. It's because the purchaser can easily get to it, and so therefore the money acquires. So now the Gemara says, there was a man who gave money for wine. So then afterwards he heard that the people of the house, he heard afterwards that the people of the house they heard that the assistant to the king, whose name was Parzak, wanted to take for himself this wine. So the guy realizes he's going to lose his wine. He says, give me back my money. I don't want the wine. They said, just like we say, meaning like the Chacham, just like the seller could go back until the Mashiach takes place, so to the purchaser. Not like Rabbi Shimon, but since you didn't get the wine yet, you didn't pull it to you, you can go back on the deal. So now we'll do the next Mishnah as we introduce this very, very complicated topic. The second, it's a new concept within Parak Hazav. This is the concept called Ona, or where you do fraud with the pricing. So basically speaking, this is a prohibition from the Torah on both the purchaser and the seller that they can't defraud a person. It's a question what exactly the parameters, but for sure, if it's 1/6, then you have to return the 1/6, and the sale is valid. But if it's more than 1/6, then the sale is canceled, and if it's less than 1/6, we say he waives his rights. So the Gemara is going to actually a little bit contradict our mission, so we have to be very careful, and it's known as one of the most difficult sugyos in the whole Shas, called the Tagri wood, the merchants of wood. So ha'ona is arba kesef me'esrim v'arba kesef. The ona, this price fraud, is 4 silver coins from 24 silver coins of a seller, meaning to say shtus u'mekach. That means to say it's 1/6 of the value of the object that's being purchased. And ad matai but at what point can you come back and make your claim that you were defrauded by a 6th? So ad kadesha yira letagor olakrova, until you come home and show to the merchants or to the relatives that look, I was defrauded. Hora Rabbi Tarfon Belud. Rabbi Tarfon taught in Lud. By the way, this is related to the Haggadah, because in the Haggadah it says Rabbi Akiva's name before Rabbi Tarfon. So the commentaries ask, well, Rabbi Tarfon was the Rebbe of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Tarfon should have been listed first. So we say no, because the incident took place in Bnei Brak, and Rabbi Tarfon lived in Lud. So it was taking place in Bnei Brak. So we say that in Bnei Brak, Rabbi Akiva was the Morad Asros, to show that Rabbi Akiva was the rabbi there. So Rabbi Tarfon gave him respect. But anyway, Rabbi Tarfon taught in Lud, Hona Shmona Kesef Me'esrim V'arba Kesef. That Hona is 8 out of 24, i.e. 1/3, shloshel mekach, 1/3 of the price. Meaning to say, before the sale is canceled, before you have to return the extra and the sale is canceled, it's 1/3, not 1/6. So you give the sellers, but also the purchasers, more leeway. Not just a 1/6, it's 1/3. Now the people and the merchants of wood, nobody was putting one over their eyes. They were sharp as anything. So they were happy now, because they said sometimes they overcharge, and now they can they're not going to be penalized. But then Rabbi Tarfon, you can imagine Rabbi Tarfon sees them enjoying the moment. He says, no. Still, you have a downside. But they have the whole day to go back, not just till they go home and show the merchants and show their wife and their brothers, but they have the whole day to go back. So the Tagri wood, these merchants of wood said, Rabbi Tarfon b'mkomenu. Let's leave Rabbi Tarfon. Rabbi Tarfon, let us be in our place, meaning to say, that they've returned to the position of the rabbis. They have 1/6, but you have that 6th only until you show your relatives or the merchants at home. So the Gemara, okay, we have to stop the recording here, but we can go on a little bit more. So because I want everybody to see the next part.